No woman had ever done this. The colonel's words, sharp and dismissive, echoed in the thin mountain air of the briefing hall. He had laughed, a short, barking sound that had made the other soldiers shift uncomfortably. Now, as Master Sergeant Anya Sharma stood at the starting line of the Serpent's Ascent, the most brutal endurance race in the armed forces, that laughter was a cold stone in the pit of her stomach. The race was a 50-kilometer trial of pain over the jagged spine of Kalin Ridge, a place that broke men for sport. The colonel and every man on this base believed it would break her before the first checkpoint. They saw a woman past her prime, a name on a transfer order. They didn't see the truth. But as the wind bit at her face and the starting flare hissed, ready to tear a gash of red in the gray dawn, Anya knew the mountain would. The mountain would see everything. She had arrived a week prior, a solitary figure stepping off the transport helicopter into the whipping, oxygen-starved wind of the Kalin Ridge High-Altitude Warfare Center. The base was an ugly, functional scar carved into the rock at 12,000 feet, a collection of prefabricated structures hunkered down against the elements. It was a place for hardening soldiers, for pushing them to their absolute limits. It was not, the unwelcoming stares told her, a place for a 40-year-old woman with a sparse administrative file. Anya shouldered her duffel bag, its weight familiar and grounding, and walked toward the barracks, her stride even and unhurried despite the burning in her lungs. The world at this altitude was stark contrasts. The brilliant, unforgiving sun and the deep, cold shadows, the immense, silent peaks and the constant, moaning wind. Her assigned bunk was the last in a long room of 20. The young soldiers, all men in their early 20s with the easy confidence of peak physical fitness, watched her. Their glances were a mixture of curiosity and condescension. She was an anomaly, an administrative error to be observed. Anya ignored them. She placed her bag on the metal-framed bed and began to unpack with a quiet, methodical economy of motion that bespoke a lifetime of discipline. Her gear was not new. The webbing on her pack was faded, the leather of her boots scuffed and worn, but every buckle was polished, every strap was perfectly coiled, every piece of equipment was immaculate. A young corporal, his name tag reading Carter, watched her fold her thermal underwear into a perfect, tight square. It was a small, insignificant action, yet she performed it with the focus of a bomb technician. It was the first subtle hint, missed by all but the most observant, that Master Sergeant Sharma was more than the paper she came with. Later, in the cacophonous mess hall, she sat alone, a small island of stillness. She ate slowly, her eyes scanning the room, not with loneliness, but with assessment. She observed the hierarchies, the loud boasts of the strongest contenders for the upcoming race, the nervous energy of the new arrivals. She was a predator in a new hunting ground, learning the patterns of the prey. The next morning, the dismissal came, just as she knew it would. They stood in formation on the frozen parade ground, their breath pluming in the frigid air. Colonel Marcus Thorne stood before them, a man carved from the same granite as the surrounding peaks. He was tall, lean, with a face that seemed permanently fixed in a scowl of dissatisfaction. His eyes, the color of chipped slate, swept across the new intake. He paused when he reached Anya. He held a tablet, her file displayed on the screen. "Master Sergeant Sharma," he said, his voice carrying with it the sharp crack of authority. "Your records are sparse." He tilted the tablet as if expecting more information to slide into view. "Transfer from a logistics and records division in Stuttgart." Paper pusher, the last word was not a question. It was a verdict. A few of the men snickered. Anya's face remained impassive. She stared at a point on the mountain peak far behind him, her expression unreadable. Thorne continued, pacing before the formation. He spoke of discipline, of weakness, of the unforgiving nature of their new home. And then he spoke of the Serpent's Ascent. "For those of you new to Kalin Ridge, we have a tradition, a rite of passage." His lips curled into something that might have been a smile on a different man. "A 50-kilometer full-pack race along the ridge. We call it the Serpent's Ascent. It will test you. It will find your breaking point, and it will push you past it." A hand went up. "Sir." Is the course the same as last year? Thorn's smirk widened. Harder. We've added the blade's edge traverse. Good luck. He then turned his gaze deliberately back to Anya, ensuring everyone saw it. We have a few administrative transfers this rotation. No one is exempt, he paused for effect. But don't feel pressured, Sergeant. We've never had a woman even complete the Serpent's Ascent, let alone place in it. He let the statement hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. Then came the short, barking laugh. Frankly, no woman has ever done this. Probably for good reason, the humiliation was public. A calculated blow to her authority and presence. Anya did not flinch. She did not blink. Inside, a familiar coldness settled over her. A feeling she had known in interrogation rooms and on windswept foreign hillsides. It wasn't anger. It was fuel. In the days that followed, Anya became a ghost. While other soldiers ran drills, lifting heavy weights and sprinting until they vomited, she moved with a quiet, almost invisible purpose. She did not react to Colonel Thorn's public scorn. She did not engage with the whispers that followed her through the barracks. The insult was a tool and she was a master of tools. She knew that anger was a fire that consumed its host. She preferred the cold, sharp edge of calculation. Her response would not be in words, but in action. She spent 2 full afternoons in the base's cartography room. The walls were covered in topographical maps of Kalin Ridge, intricate webs of contour lines and elevation markers. While others glanced at them, she consumed them. She traced the route of the Serpent's Ascent with her finger, again and again, until the terrain was imprinted on her mind. She memorized every gradient, every potential rockfall area, every stream crossing. She noted the prevailing wind directions at different altitudes, the way the shadows would fall across the valleys at different times of day. Her physical preparation was just as methodical. She didn't join the pack of runners on the track. Instead, she took long, solitary walks along the base perimeter, her pace steady, her focus entirely on her breathing. She was recalibrating her body to the thin, hostile air. In 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2. Out 2, 3, 4. She was teaching her blood to carry oxygen with maximum efficiency. She watched the other contenders, the ones Thorn favored, the ones who strutted around the base like future kings. They displayed their new, expensive gear. Carbon fiber poles, lightweight synthetic packs. Anya looked at her own worn equipment. She trusted it. She knew its every flaw and every strength. In the small workshop, she spent an evening modifying her boots. She carefully unstitched a section of the lining and inserted a thin layer of mylar she had scavenged from a discarded thermal blanket, then stitched it back up with a surgeon's precision. It was a tiny modification, invisible to anyone else, but she knew it would provide a critical barrier against the cold that would creep up from the frozen ground, saving her precious energy her body would otherwise spend on warmth. She was not preparing to run a race. She was preparing for a mission. The pressure mounted as the day of the race approached. It became a palpable entity, a weight in the air almost as heavy as the low, bruised purple clouds that were rolling in over the peaks. The weather forecast, posted in the mess hall, was a litany of warnings. Falling temperatures, high winds, significant snowfall expected by midday. The Serpent's Ascent was already a monster. The storm would give it teeth and claws. Colonel Thorn seemed to relish the news. At the final pre-race briefing, he stood before the anxious competitors, his expression one of grim satisfaction. "The storm is moving in," he announced, his voice cutting through the nervous murmurs. "The race will proceed as scheduled. This mountain doesn't care about your comfort. Neither do I. If you can't handle a little snow, you have no business wearing this uniform." His words were like stones thrown into a nervous crowd, scattering what little confidence they had left. In the barracks that night, the atmosphere was thick with anxiety. Men who had boasted of their strength all week were now quiet, their faces drawn. They spoke in hushed tones about previous races, about soldiers who had suffered severe frostbite, about one man who had fallen and was never the same. The legend of the Serpent's Ascent was growing darker with every gust of wind that rattled the windows. Corporal Ben Carter, whose bunk was opposite Anya's, was a bundle of raw nerves. He was field stripping his rifle for the third time in an hour, a repetitive, useless action to occupy his trembling hands. He finally looked up, his young face pale. He saw Anya, sitting on the edge of her bunk, methodically laying out her gear on a clean towel. Her movements were slow, deliberate, serene. "You're calm, Sergeant," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Anya paused, her hand hovering over a tightly rolled compression bandage. She looked at him, her dark eyes holding his for a moment. "Panic uses oxygen," she said. The statement was brief, factual, and utterly devoid of emotion. It hung in the air between them, a simple truth that cut through his fear. She then returned to her task, checking the seam on her waterproof trousers, testing the clasp on her hip belt, ensuring every item was exactly where it needed to be. She was a picture of absolute focus, an anchor of stability in a rising sea of panic. The world was gray and frozen. A single red flare shot into the sky, its hiss swallowed by the vast, indifferent silence of the mountain. The serpent's ascent had begun. A surge of adrenaline propelled the front runners off the line, a chaotic mass of shoulders and elbows as nearly 100 soldiers jostled for an early lead. They were a pack of wolves, eager and aggressive. Anya was not among them. She crossed the starting line in the last third of the racers, settling immediately into a slow, rhythmic jog that seemed almost lazy in comparison to the frantic energy around her. In the glass-walled control tower overlooking the start, Colonel Thorne watched the GPS trackers on a large digital map. He sipped his coffee, a smug look on his face. "There," he said to his aide, Lieutenant Mendoza, pointing to a blinking, already falling behind the main group. "Number 73. Sharma. Told you. She'll be on the first evac truck before checkpoint Alpha." The lieutenant nodded, though he kept his eyes on the screen, a flicker of something other than certainty in his expression. Anya could hear the pounding feet and labored breathing of the men who passed her. They shot her glances of pity or disdain. She ignored them all. Her world had shrunk to the rhythm of her own body. For steps, breathe in. For steps, breathe out. Her heart rate, monitored by the watch on her wrist, settled at 145 beats per minute. The zone. The place where endurance lived and exhaustion was kept at bay. She was not racing them. She was racing the mountain, and the mountain demanded respect, not speed. The first major obstacle was a long, brutal incline, a section of the trail that climbed 2,000 feet in less than 3 miles. The sprinters hit it hard. Within minutes, their explosive start began to betray them. Their form broke down, their powerful strides shortening to a pained shuffle. They gasped for air, their lungs screaming for oxygen the air did not have. Anya reached the base of the incline and did not change her pace. Her slow jog became a powerful, deliberate walk. Each step was placed with care. Her breathing rhythm remained unbroken. She was a human metronome, steady and relentless. As she climbed, she began to pass the first casualties of the race. Men bent over, hands on their knees, retching into the scrubby grass. They had burned too hot, too fast. Anya passed them without a word, her eyes fixed on the trail ahead. Her intervention was not one of action, but of strategy. She was a testament to the quiet power of conservation, a lesson being written one steady step at a time on the side of the unforgiving mountain. Checkpoint Bravo, the halfway point, was a desolate outpost of misery. A single large tent, buffeted by ferocious winds, offered the only shelter on a high, exposed saddle. The storm, which had been a threat, was now a raging reality. Snow, driven almost horizontally by the wind, stung any exposed skin and reduced visibility to a few dozen feet. The leaders, a trio of elite rangers who had been setting a punishing pace, stumbled into the checkpoint looking like ghosts. Their faces were ashen with exhaustion, their beards and eyebrows caked in ice. They collapsed near the heater, gulping down water, their bodies trembling. In the warmth of the control tower, the mood was equally tense. The digital map was a mess of blinking dots. More than 20 racers had already dropped out, their GPS signals turning red, signaling for evacuation. Colonel Thorne stood with his arms crossed, his jaw tight. He was watching the storm reports, his earlier smugness replaced by a grim concern. It was Lieutenant Mendoza who spoke first. "Sir, look at number 73. Sharma, his voice was quiet, laced with disbelief. Thorne's eyes snapped to the screen. Anya's dot, which had been a forgotten straggler for the first hour, was no longer in the rear. It had moved steadily, inexorably through the pack. While others had stopped for long rests at Checkpoint Alpha, her GPS data showed a pause of only 94 seconds, just long enough to refill her water and swallow a nutrient gel. She was now in 8th place. Thorne leaned closer to the screen, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the console. "Zoom in. Give me her biometrics." Mendoza typed a few commands. Anya's vital signs appeared on a secondary screen. Heart rate, 146 BPM, a steady, unwavering line. Core body temperature, 984 degrees Fahrenheit, perfectly stable. He then pulled up the vitals for the current leader, a brawny captain from the 10th Mountain Division. His heart rate was a chaotic sawtooth pattern, spiking to 180 on inclines and plummeting during rests. His core temperature was already a degree below normal. Thorne stared at the two data streams, the erratic line of the leader and the placid, steady line of the woman he had dismissed. The laughter from the morning briefing felt like a distant, foolish memory. His rigid assumptions were beginning to fracture, eroded by the steady, undeniable data on the screen. Dismissal was giving way to a grudging, intense curiosity. "Rostov," he barked at a communications tech. "Get a camera drone on her. Now, I want eyes on number 73. The most feared section of the Serpent's Ascent was now directly in Anya's path. It was a narrow, treacherous ridge of ice-blasted rock known as the Blade's Edge. A misstep to the left or right meant a fall of several hundred feet onto the glacier below. The storm was at its peak here, the wind a physical force that threatened to rip racers from their footing. A steel cable bolted into the rock served as a safety line, the only thing between the competitors and death. As Anya methodically made her way onto the traverse, she saw a figure crumpled on the path ahead. It was one of the three leaders, a young lieutenant named Hayes. He had slipped on a patch of black ice. His leg was bent at a sickeningly unnatural angle, caught in a crevice. Worse, in his fall, the carabiner connecting him to the safety cable had snapped under the shock load. He was clinging to a small handhold, his face a mask of terror and pain, his knuckles white against the dark rock. The other two leaders were further ahead, already disappearing into the swirling snow. They had seen him fall. They had made a choice. The race was more important. Anya did not hesitate. The race, the win, Colonel Thorne's respect, it all vanished. There was only the mission, the life in front of her. She approached the injured man, her crampons biting securely into the ice. Her movements were calm, efficient, and utterly devoid of panic. "Don't move," she said, her voice clear and steady over the howl of the wind. He whimpered, his eyes wide with shock. She didn't offer words of comfort. She offered competence. She unclipped the secondary safety line from her own pack, a piece of equipment most racers considered dead weight. With swift, practiced motions, she anchored it to a solid rock outcropping behind her. The knot she used, a double figure-8 bend, tied in less than 3 seconds. She clipped the other end to the lieutenant's harness, securing him to the mountain. Only then did she address his trapped leg. She analyzed the position, the pressure points, the angle of the fracture. She instructed him to shift his weight a fraction of an inch to the left. Then, using her ice axe not as a weapon but as a lever, she applied precise pressure to the rock pinning his boot. The maneuver was a masterpiece of physics and experience, a technique not taught in any standard manual but learned in the unforgiving classrooms of real-world crisis. The rock shifted. His leg came free. In the control tower, the drone feed showed the entire rescue in stark, high-definition detail. The room was silent. Thorne and his men watched as Anya sacrificed precious minutes, her lead, and potentially the entire race to save a competitor. She wasn't just navigating the test. She was mastering it, rewriting its rules from a simple race to a demonstration of true soldiering. Thorne stared at the screen, his face unreadable. as Anya finished securing the injured man and activated his emergency beacon before turning back to the course. Just as Anya resumed her relentless pace, a new figure entered the heated calm of the control tower. It was Sergeant Eva Rostova, a communications specialist who had just arrived at Kalin Ridge to oversee a systems upgrade. She was stamping snow from her boots when her eyes caught the large screen displaying the drone feed. She stopped, her head tilting. She walked closer, her gaze fixed on the determined figure of Anya moving along the ridge. A look of stunned recognition dawned on her face. "Is that?" she breathed, her voice barely audible. She turned to the colonel, who was still staring intently at the screen. "Sir, forgive me for asking, but who is GPS tag 73? Thorne didn't take his eyes off the feed. "Master Sergeant Sharma," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. "An administrative transfer from Stuttgart." Rostova let out a short, incredulous laugh, shaking her head. "Sir, with all due respect, that's not Master Sergeant Sharma. That's a cover designation." All activity in the control room ceased. Every head turned toward her. Rostova pointed at the screen. "I was her signals intelligence support for 3 years. On 3 different continents. That is Wraith." The name fell into the silent room like a grenade. She was the lead field operator for the Tier 1 unit, Task Force Chimera. Her real file is sealed under the Centurion Protocol. It's probably the most classified document on this entire mountain. She looked around at the stunned faces of Thorne and his staff. "The reason her file is sparse, sir, is because 99% of what she's done is illegal to even acknowledge. She's a ghost. A legend." The control room was dead quiet. The only sound the hum of the electronics and the distant howl of the wind outside. Colonel Thorne slowly turned his gaze from Rostova back to the screen, where the paper pusher was now moving with chilling speed. She had already passed the spot where the other 2 leaders were struggling, and was closing the distance to the finish line. The name Wraith hung in the air, an impossible, terrifying truth made real. The finish line was nothing more than a strip of red fabric, a stark banner of civilization stretched between 2 metal poles, now being whipped into a frenzy by the wind. The final kilometer of the Serpent's ascent was a cruel joke. A steep, open-faced slog through thigh-deep snow, all within sight of the end. The 2 remaining leaders, the ranger captain and his partner, were visible now, staggering through the snowfield like broken things. They were running on pure grit, their bodies long since spent. Every few steps, they would look back over their shoulders, their faces etched with a new kind of fear, not of the mountain but of what was behind them. Then she appeared. Anya crested the final rise, a dark figure of inexorable momentum against the white landscape. She wasn't sprinting. She didn't need to. Her stride was a thing of brutal efficiency, her legs churning like pistons, her poles digging in and driving her forward. She was not fueled by adrenaline, but by a deep, cold well of will that seemed bottomless. She drew level with the 2 men. She did not look at them. She did not speak. Her gaze was locked on the red banner. She passed them as if they were standing still. They were too broken to even mount a challenge, their spirits crushed by the sheer, undeniable fact of her. Anya Sharma crossed the finish line. There was no triumphant cry, no arms raised in victory. She simply stopped. She planted her poles in the snow, placed her hands on her knees, and took 3 deep, controlled breaths. The storm seemed to hold its breath with her. Then, she straightened up, her back ramrod straight, and stood facing the crowd that had gathered. The entire base, it seemed, had braved the blizzard to witness the end of the race. The usual roar of applause and cheering for a winner was conspicuously absent. In its place was a profound, almost sacred silence. The only sound was the wind. Out of the control tower, a figure emerged, walking deliberately through the deep snow. It was Colonel Thorne. He stopped directly in front of Anya, his face raw from the cold. The man who had laughed, who had dismissed her with a wave of his hand, now stood before her, his certainty shattered. He looked at the ice clinging to her hair, the exhaustion she refused to show, and the unwavering iron in her eyes. He did not offer a handshake. He did not offer a word of congratulation. Instead, he brought his right hand up in a slow, perfectly executed salute. It wasn't the perfunctory gesture owed to a senior NCO. It was a mark of profound respect, an admission of his own blindness, an acknowledgement from one warrior to another. In that moment, rank and gender and prejudice evaporated into the frozen air. A beat later, a single sound broke the silence as Lieutenant Mendoza, standing behind Thorne, snapped his own hand up in salute. Then another and another. A silent, powerful wave of respect rippled through the crowd, as every soldier present followed their commander's lead. Their salutes a collective apology and a promise of acceptance. Hours later, the storm had finally broken, leaving behind a world scoured clean and draped in white. The infirmary buzzed with the quiet activity of medics tending to the race's casualties. Racers were being treated for various stages of exhaustion, dehydration, and frostbite. Lieutenant Hayes, the man Anya had rescued from the blade's edge, was stable, his legs set in a cast. The talk was of his impossible luck, and of the ghost who had saved him. Anya was not in the infirmary. She was in her barracks room, which was quiet now, most of its occupants either in medical or sleeping off their ordeal. She had already showered. Her gear was not thrown in a corner, but laid out in neat, clean pieces across her bunk. She had disassembled her pack, wiped down every strap, and was now methodically re-waterproofing the seams with a small tin of wax. The ritual was calming, centering. The door creaked open. Corporal Carter entered, moving quietly, as if entering a church. He held a steaming ceramic mug in his hands. He didn't speak at first, just walked over and placed the mug on the small metal nightstand beside her bunk. It was a simple offering, hot coffee, a token of warmth against the pervasive cold. He finally found his voice, though it was soft with awe. They're all talking about you, Sergeant. He looked at her, then at her meticulously organized gear. They're calling you the Wraith of Kalin Ridge. Anya paused her work. She looked at the steam rising from the mug, then at the young corporal's earnest face. A flicker of something, not a smile, but a softening, touched the corners of her eyes. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Thank you, Corporal," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it held the weight of genuine gratitude. Carter nodded back, then retreated as silently as he had come, leaving her to her solitude. Anya picked up the warm mug, its heat seeping into her cold fingers. She walked to the room's single window and looked out. The setting sun had broken through the clouds, bathing the summit of Kalin Ridge in spectacular hues of fiery orange and deep purple. She had won the race. She had silenced the laughter. But standing there, watching the light fade on the peak, she felt neither triumph nor joy. The race was just another mountain. The win was just another objective secured. She had proven nothing to herself she didn't already know. But the respect, earned in the crucible of ice and wind, was different. It was a silent acknowledgement of who she was, not what a file said she was. The quiet dignity of her silhouette against the darkening window, a solitary figure holding a simple mug of coffee, was the only trophy she had ever needed.